All right. Looks like we are live. All right. I will just very quickly play the
Welcome to the Pakistan Cricket Podcast. Live World Cup final preview between Pakistan and England.
I'm cringing because I wasn't like self-conscious of that. And then I just remembered Atif Nawaz's face the last time I did it. And he was just like laughing the whole time. So now it's making me really self-conscious doing that. So I'm going to stop. We got played that way too soon. All right. So this is the live preview of the Pakistan-England World Cup final scheduled to take place in less than 24 hours, hopefully. I have four brilliant guests with me today. Wisdom.com's managing editor, Ben Gardner, the ex-professional cricketer Azeem Rafiq, who captained Yorkshire, as well as the England under-19 team during his career as an off-spinning all-rounder. The cricket broadcaster Hijab Zahid, and Salaar, who is a Pakistan cricket fan who is ever present on Twitter Spaces, as well as the Corn Tigers podcast, among others, Relu Katte as well. He does have a new baby, apparently, which I've congratulated him for. But then now I'm like not sure if this baby exists because he's always on fucking Twitter Spaces. Like I'm not so sure about this anymore. So I don't know if I congratulated him on a fake baby. He's also we don't have time to discuss this, but I think he's also Khushdil Shah's nephew, which only some of us know. But no time to get into this, Salah. Don't worry about it. Now I think Ben, I wanted to start with you with this question. I might be biased. Well, I am definitely biased as a Pakistani cricket fan in thinking that Pakistan has been the front and center for a lot of this World Cup. Both in terms of its ups, losing to Zimbabwe, or not downs, but downs when it comes to losing to Zimbabwe, and ups when it comes to, beating South Africa miraculously, qualifying in the way we did, and then beating New Zealand. But also Pak Mr. Bean, the funny stuff too. As a cricket writer in this group, I figured you're the person to start with this. Is there some truth to this, or am I just putting Pakistani goggles on?
Oh yeah, definitely. And you can go back way before this World Cup to find Pakistan always being the main character at these events. I guess they've basically made quite a lot of these global events like good, essentially. Like you go back to the 2019 World Cup, that group stage would have dragged on and on and on if it wasn't for Pakistan making that late run towards the semi-finals and then just getting knocked out and then being so good last year and then obviously it all crumbling in the semi-finals, which obviously it has to do, right? Like I wrote a piece during that tournament. I don't know if any of you ever played the game Line Rider. It was like a flash game during like the mid 2000s. It was quite popular. What you'd basically do is you just like get your mouse and like click and draw a line. You could do like loop-de-loops and whatever. And then when you press play, this like guy on a sled would just drop out and he'd go like up and then he'd go round and then he'd go down. And you can get him to do jumps and stuff. So basically all the momentum that was going downwards, that would be what would carry you through the upstream. But if you go up, you know that there's the inevitability of a crash after that. That's what Pakistan cricket has felt like at world tournaments. I mean, for ages, right? I mean, the similarities to 1992. So they've really paced this one to perfection. The 2 losses, that gives you so much downward momentum that it's always just going to come back up. And now it's kind of hard to see anything stopping them, I guess. And even if they don't, I mean, I think they've really deserved a showpiece like this. I mean, obviously the Champions Trophy in 2017 was great, and that was also a similar campaign to this one in terms of how it started and how they rebuilt Mohammed Harris and the Fakhar Zaman role and that sort of thing. But they've deserved a World Cup final, I think, just for how much they've given to world cricket and world tournaments over the past like half a decade more throughout the entirety of World Cup's existence, I guess. But it is worth saying that this has been a brilliant World Cup outside of Pakistan. I mean, that other group was great. You had, Ireland upsetting England, England then being left with no margin for error, Rashid Khan almost pulling off that heist. The Netherlands story in and of itself is amazing outside of the impacts for Pakistan. For
Absolutely,
them
yeah.
to finish 8th at a World Cup, that's astonishing, really. So it has been a brilliant World Cup, but yeah, there's no doubt that the centre of it has been Pakistan, I think.
That's what we wanted to hear. Azeem, I think you responded to the Pakistan, qualifying for the semifinal and then winning the semifinal with, how do you explain this? Like, I don't know. How do you sum up Pakistan, being in the final?
Yeah, I think it's so difficult to sum up Pakistan at all, really. I listened to some of the spaces for about 10-15 minutes. All the people.
Oh shit! Sorry.
All the people trying to analyze everything, and you think you can't analyze them. I mean, how do you explain that day against Zimbabwe and then to beat South Africa and then go on to play like that in the semi-final against New Zealand, who were arguably, up to them, were the most consistent team?
Mm-hmm.
And look at the impact of Seklen. He's even got Ben believing in Kudrat ka Nizam, talking once you put down, back up, right? Kudrat ka Nizam. So, I mean, that phrase has become quite popular, but he clearly has a way of inspiring his dressing room. He's not there to make everyone else happy.
Mm-hmm.
Follow Pakistan cricket at all, you've got absolutely no chance of making everyone else happy. So clearly he gets the best out of this team. I think it's been such a fun World Cup to follow. If you take the weather out of it, the associate teams winning, I think that's been, for me, one of the highlights. And I think, if anything, it's a message again to the ICC that T20 is the route to growing the game. And then obviously the India-Pakistan game, again, how it was just an incredible viewing. But for me, the highlights have got to be around the associate teams and the impact they've made, even when they've not won.
That's so true. And also, I remember before we started recording, you were talking about what a likable team this is. I want to get back to that if we get a chance. Hijab, what about you? What I think your emotions are all over your Twitter TL, so we can see that.
Well, obviously, they have to be. As a fan, as somebody who's been watching cricket for years, for a decade, more than a decade now, obviously, they are all over the place. But then again, I knew it from the very start, from the get-go, that this is a team that is beyond analysis. You have to understand, you can try and analyze Pakistan, but you can't do that. I don't think they themselves can do that. I pity the analyst who's with the team right now, because I don't think he knows what's going on at the moment, and I don't think he is understanding the whole thing, the journey, the everything. But yeah, at the ever mercurial Pakistan, I mean, come on, Ben has already said it perfectly. I would say that they have been at the center of this World Cup. They have been the hot topic of conversation, and for good reason. See, there are teams who do very well in bilaterals, the teams who are ranked number 1 and number 2 throughout the years, and they've kind of occupied that spot for years now, but they don't particularly do well in ICC tournaments. But with Pakistan, it's actually the opposite. They always show up in the ICC tournaments. They might not always win them. They might not always go all the way or to the finals, but they always show up in the tournaments. And it's all about the attitude, in my opinion. I mean, I really like how they're going about the whole World Cup. I was watching the presser this morning from Babar, and he said that we are not nervous, we're just excited. We didn't think that we would be here, but we always believed that we deserved a spot, and now that we've got it, we're going to make the most of it. And I think that's basically the key. But yeah, as a fan, what a roller coaster ride this has been. I mean, come on. I saw a video or an edit this morning, somebody made that, and that was they were just going through the whole journey of Pakistan. I was looking at it, I was like, this has got to be a movie. This cannot be real. Please tell this is not real. I mean, look at their faces after the first 2 games, the way that they were down and out, and then that comeback against the South African game, and Netherlands beating South Africa. I mean, who would have thought? I was asleep, by the way, during that game. That was 5 a.m. in the morning in Pakistan. I was asleep. I didn't think we were Netherlands was gonna beat South Africa. I'm gonna be very, very honest. I was like, okay, I'll wake up at 9 a.m., watch Pakistan versus Bangladesh, and then just say goodbye to the World Cup. That is how it was supposed to go, I guess. But yeah, when I woke up, and so let me share this little story. So I woke up, I switched my TV on, right? And the presenter they were presenting after the game was right. And then we're gonna talk with the winning captain. And I myself was just I just woke up very groggy, and I'm expecting Demba Bavuma coming in and just giving his winning speech. And out comes Tom Cooper, and I'm like, what? How is this possible? How, when, what? Then I opened Twitter and I just saw the whole discussion around Netherlands winning, and I saw that catch by Demov. It was ridiculous. What a journey this has been. And let's not. I know I'm all for Qudrat Ka Nizam and everything. Although I think that
are you not? Are you
no,
Hijab?
I think that phrase has been very much overused. So, like, let's not take away the efforts of everybody. I'm not just talking about Pakistan's effort. I'm talking about Ireland's effort. I'm talking about Netherlands' effort and all the associate teams that played before the Super 12 stage. I mean, look at those games. If you watch those games, the ones that were qualifiers, they were ridiculously close games, and they were superb games. So I don't know. I just felt like that this World Cup has been a wake up call for everybody that associate teams are here and they're here to stay. And I really like the fact that Ireland and Netherlands and Zimbabwe were the teams who were, obviously I'm not happy that Zimbabwe beat Pakistan, but I'm glad that they got the glory that they deserved because they've been brilliant throughout the whole tournament, I guess.
No, it's funny you said that about how you didn't watch the game. I actually wasn't planning on watching the game. My friend invited me to his house. I actually haven't told anybody this. And then I went to his house to watch the World Series final on like a cinema screen, American style, like basement. And I just like put my cricket phone and I was like, oh shit. So I started watching it. So I was like sitting in their big basement while they're watching the World Series while I'm screaming on the side. But my favorite part was actually, I don't know if you all watched the Salaar. I know you did because we talked about it last night about how Shadab was watching the game, where they were watching it, where he gave the interview where he was initially in the gym looking Cricinfo scores, then he started watching the game on the screen, and then when the finale was happening, them and the Bangladesh team were together in the dining halls watching the game before it happened. Salaar, what about you? What's been your sort of take in general of
I mean, I think Pakistan cricket has grown, known to sort of thrive in chaos. That's sort of our USP. It's kind of enriched in our DNA in most ways. Over the last going close to 3 decades of following them, anytime Pakistan's won a tournament or made whether it's 2009, like 2019, the kind of run we had, 1992, where we keep getting reminded of the deja vu behind it. It's always a down in the dumps feeling and then sort of rising from the ashes. And once they click, the momentum clicks, everything seems to come together. And I think that's just been, the truest sort of identity of what Pakistan cricket is, right? In my eyes, at least. So I think this is not surprising. If you follow that line of thought, it's not surprising by any means, right? Although I do have to mention, you mentioned my daughter, who's all of 8 weeks now. Over the last, ever since the World Cup started, I've grown to appreciate how she consciously makes an effort to make sure I don't miss a ball of the action, whether it's waking up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever it is. And I think the truest moment for me after the Zimbabwe game, we cried our hearts out, and that was such a bonding moment. If that's Pakistan cricket for you, right? Bringing families together, if that isn't an advert, I don't know what would be.
And I think, were you part of the, I did not take part in that, but was there like a live Twitter space watch along you were part of? Is that
I wouldn't be surprised if there was, but there was a meltdown, as you'd expect after the Zimbabwe game. It's just more than the result, just the manner in which it happened, given the trauma of the India game. Maybe
I was thinking about the Netherlands game. I think there was like a sort of a watch along on Twitter, right? Like
the Netherlands game, absolutely there was the watch along, because after Netherlands, South Africa, that was our last bit of hope, because I think everybody was resigned that the Indian team was too strong for Zimbabwe, given their batting order and the form that Surya Kumar Yadav was in and whatnot. So a lot of our hopes were pinned on Netherlands. Let's just leave it at that.
All right. Now, getting to the Pakistan-England game, I think I told you all that I was thinking of, framing the conversation through what Matt Roller, not Roller, as I called him in the interview, the clash of ideologies between the two teams, right? And I think, for those who haven't read the piece or listened to the interview, basically what he's talking about very simply is that Pakistan have a approach which is based on stability, low ceiling, high floor, with Babar and Rizwan sort of setting decent scores, not high scores, and then relying on the bowling, because that's where the strength is. Whereas England's relative weaknesses is bowling, and so they go hard. Their strength is their hitting, where they can hit from the top to the bottom. And so what he says is that people think that there's only one way to win in T20 cricket, Whereas if you look at Pakistan versus England, it shows a very interesting sort of contrast in how to approach T20 cricket and win in T20 cricket. So Ben, I'm curious what your take on that is.
Yeah, I've got quite a lot of thoughts actually. I think it's interesting framing it as like an ideology or a philosophy, which is definitely true to an extent, but it's also just kind of like playing the cricket that the players you have allow you to play. England have so many all-rounders, and Curran is now one of their best 3 bowlers. So they're always going to bat down to number 8 and had Adil Rashid at number 11 in the semi-final. That allows you to attack with a certain amount of freedom. Pakistan aren't going to not pick any of Ralph, Shaheen, Naseem or Mohammad Wasim Jr., but none of them can really bat that well. So they kind of, that restricts them to being more conservative. But when you add into that the struggles that their middle order has had, then you see why Babar and Rizwan bat the way that they do. But I also think that this tournament has been really interesting because obviously they do have these 2 distinct playing styles. But I think this tournament, you've actually seen both of them like either wrestling with it or tweaking it as they go along. And actually the final could be defined by what plan the 2 teams go in with and how well they're able to embrace the style that they choose to play. Like if you think about England, you think of them playing this fearless cricket when actually they really struggled over the line against Sri Lanka and Afghanistan. They were too cautious against Ireland and that's why they lost it. And against New Zealand even, Butler and Hales put on like a kind of a Babar Rizwan-esque opening stand. They weren't going that quickly. Obviously they get going at the end and they kind of that sort of, that's where the depth comes in and they get up to that 180 score. But it was they got there in quite a weird way, I guess. And then, obviously they blitz it in the semi-final, but you get a mammoth opening stand. That kind of happens. And even whether you look at the makeup of their side, picking both Milan and Stokes, obviously Milan's injured now, but that gives them sort of, that's the most conservative batting lineup England have picked for a long, long time, really, with those 2 being really players who like to get set and then go. And it's been interesting to see them kind of like grapple with that. And I think in a way, although I feel like devastated for Milan, who has obviously worked so hard, been a central part of this team to through the 5-year journey really to this final now, to be likely to be missing the final. The balance feels like more England, I guess, with Salt there either at 3 or coming in as the finisher, I guess. And then with Pakistan, you've almost had the opposite thing, right? Like Babar and Rizwan, they were really proactive in that semi-final. Even after the power play, they kind of kept going. Actually, it got to the last over because when they got out, that was when the slowdown happened. It wasn't maybe the Babar Rizwan sort of take the power play and then consolidate and then go again, which is what has been criticised. This was they took the power play, they kept going, and then they got out, and then there was a little bit of a stumble, I guess. But you look at like Mohammed Harris coming into the team, he's added a completely new dimension to that lineup, I think, in terms of that proactivity, just that striking from ball 1. He's been absolutely brilliant. But they've been like trying to find that solution for quite a long time and have tried lots of different things. They've promoted Shadab at times, and that's worked, and then sometimes it hasn't worked. They promoted Mohammed Nawaz sometimes to take down the spinners, and that's worked or it hasn't worked. But they play the way they play, but you can kind of see they haven't been totally happy with it. Like it's not as if they have decided this is definitely the best way to do it and they won't try and change it at all. They've been trying to sort of play a different way, and I think they've now stumbled on, in quite Pakistani fashion, halfway through a world tournament, they've stumbled on the ideal combination, and that is Harris at 4, and then they've got actually a few all-rounders now. They've still got that longish tail if you get down to number 8, but actually there's dynamism all the way through that after that really solid opening partnership. So yeah, the clash of playing styles will be fascinating, but also it's still, even now, you're not exactly sure how the 2 teams are going to play when it comes to a world final, how the pressure is going to tell on an England team that's coming to the end of its cycle and a Pakistan team that's still kind of finding its identity. So I think it's really interesting.
And Azeem, I think I'm pretty sure you've captained in T20 cricket as well. So like, I'm curious, like what your take on the sort of playing styles is, and a thing that I think Ben already brought up was the idea that about like how you set a template is that England, right, has become a bit more conservative, but Pakistan, since Matt wrote that article, have been much more flexible in the batting order, have put Shadab up, Nawaz up, etc. So I'm kind of curious about your take on this.
Yeah, I don't actually think it's an ideology, because I think every team would love to bat the way England does. I think if you offer it to, because I think England have just taken white ball cricket and the way it's constructed to another level in terms of the batting point of view. And, every team would love to have, Adil Rashid coming in at number 11, their best fast bowlers to be top hitters as well. I just don't think it's that easy. And I think this is where I know Oy Morgan gets a lot of credit, but I still don't think he gets enough, because I think what he's done, so when I've captained in the past, it's been about a lot of the teams, what they do is pick their best players and then pick roles. Within T20 cricket, my view is you've actually got to pick how you're going to play and then pick the best players for them specific roles. We tried to do a similar thing in 2012 at Yorkshire. Now, I think T20 started in 2003 and we'd never got to the finals day. And new coaches came in, and there was this thing about, certain individual players had done really well, but the team hadn't. And the coaches wanted to go a different way in terms of how we played the game. And some of them individuals are like, yeah, but it's worked for me. But the question was, well, how much has the team won? And one of the things that we brought in was that we would go down this line of 6, 4, 3, 2, 1. So when we're batting, from ball 1, we're looking to hit a 6. If we can't, then we go to 4, then 3, 2, 1. But one thing we said was 9 times out of 10, we've got to back ourselves that it'll work for us. But the one time it doesn't, that's going to be the test, because it will be embarrassing. Be a 60 all out type thing. And that just goes back to what Owen Morgan's done. And I know there's been games from 2015 onwards, and I can't remember it, but I can remember some of the press conferences where England have gone hell for leather, been bowled out in like 35 overs, and they lose the game. And the questions are always, going too hard. Shall we tone it down? But his vision, and he saw the bigger picture of what that created. And then from them, I think that's just gone down into county cricket. And then it's shown people that's the way that if you want to get into the England team, that's how you've got to play. And then I think that's opened up experiences for a lot of the batters around the T20 leagues. And I think that confidence has grown and grown. So I don't think it is a clash of ideologies. I just don't think anyone else can do what England does. And, looking on to tomorrow, I think I read earlier that possibly Mark Wood is fit, possibly Malan's fit as well. And I think that Pakistan should not get anywhere near England. If you want to analyse it, should not get, no one should really. England at their best, I think the way they bat should be really hard to get to. But if there's any team in the world that can beat England tomorrow, that's probably Pakistan. So I think it's going to be exciting, but I don't think it's an ideology. Even if you compare all the other teams, I don't think so. I don't think any of the teams, India play in a similar way to Pakistan. I think all have, and I don't think it's because they don't want to. I think it's they can't.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And I think from what I remember from what Matt was saying as well was that, if you think about like franchise cricket, you start from a blank slate, right? Islamabad United can say, we want to play this way, and then you can pick players from around the world. Whereas international cricket, you have a limited pool. So you want a playing style, but then you have to match it with the players you have. And as you say, we don't have an abundance of 360 hitters. Like England's bench a lot of England's batting bench could be starting for Pakistan easily in the batting side, right? Maybe not bowling side. So you're completely right. Like, go ahead.
I mean, England are missing first choice players and still able to put, dare I say, I think England are a better team currently without Malan in it. A little bit controversial because I think Salt brings a different style, which could, with Stokes, the way he's playing, they've got a little bit of an anchor. But, I think it goes back down to sort of the domestic cricket and the messages from coaches around that, because if you're going to ask your players to be fearless, you've got to back them with actions. The coaches that will talk about, fearless cricket, got to play a new brand. But the minute it goes wrong, players get dropped. And when you're asking players to take high risks, you've got to understand they're going to get it wrong. But it's your language and your actions around that'll give them the confidence to go out there and do it again. First of all, going out there, if you try and scoop in Pakistan cricket and get out, you better get ready.
Yeah, exactly. That was the worst time to get out. How could he play that shot, at this crucial stage? And that could be any stage.
So it's about when you want to see that style of cricket, it's not given on a plate to you. You've got to all work together and understand that when it goes wrong, it's going to be bad, but you're looking for that bigger picture. And, 2015 onwards, England have grown and grown. And like Ben said, even England at times through this tournament have been a little bit cautious, not as. I think that's where Owen Morgan's sort of little miss, but you can see Josh Butler's sort of getting into the role now and starting to now really get that same type of language or same type of feeling within the dressing room. Yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting game if it doesn't rain.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Rain word. Yeah, it would be such a shame. Hijab, going with the clash of ideologies, but another way of thinking about it is, I don't know if you saw Nasser Hussain's interview of Shadab Khan yesterday. Amazing interview. And, I think another way to think about the same thing is to say the best batting team in the world versus the best bowling team. What's your take?
No, I think that's a pretty immaculate way of describing it. We do definitely have the pace attack and the spin attack combined that could trouble any batting lineup in the world. But I believe that I actually second what Azeem Bhai said right there, that England are the white ball beast. It's going to be very, very hard to beat them on a day that they decide to show up with all their might. And obviously they're coming off a 10-wicket win in a World Cup semi-final. That has got to give you a whole lot of boost. We saw what happened with Pakistan last year. They had a win in pocket that was, by 10 wickets. That was a very dominating win over India last year. And they went on to win the rest of all of their games, the group games I'm talking about, and they were on a roll, right? So you think that England, because of that dominating performance, they were yet to play their best game. They did that in the semi-final, and I think they'll be full of confidence right now. The kind of form that Alex Hales is in, he really scares me. I'm an Islamabad United fan. I know what Hales can do. I've seen it many, many times. But this time I'm not backing him, obviously. No more hailstorm for me on Sunday. But yeah, I'm very scared of him right now, because I think the kind of batsman he is doesn't regard who is bowling to him. He'll just go for it as long as his batting is concerned. So yeah, I believe that I've heard a lot of people comment about this and say that power play is going to be the key. I was reading a lot of things, and then coming across a lot of people commentating on the second semi-final versus England versus India, and the one thing that all of them kept saying was that India lost it in the power play, because India basically lost both the power plays, while batting and then while bowling as well. So my question to both Azeem Bhai and to Ben and to Salaar and you as well is, do you believe that if one of the teams do not win the power play, is there any way that they can come back from that?
Salaar, why don't you go first? I was going to actually say the same thing. They're talking about like what an insanely great batting team that is. And for me, it's like, especially Butler. Get Butler early. Shaheen needs to get Butler early with that sort of in-swinger. In the same way that he got, Shaheen versus Allen was the big sort of matchup, right? That set us up big time. We need to get Butler. What's your take?
Yeah, honestly, I think we talked about Matt Roller's ideologies analogy, and I hear what Azeem Bhai said, what Ben said, but I think from his perspective, there is some merit to it. And to a certain extent, if you look at the way Pakistan approach a game of T20 cricket, or the way England approach a game of T20 cricket, you do see a little bit of a difference there in terms of approach, in the sense that Pakistan has this, I'm not sure if you want to call it an obsession, but they want to take the game as deep as possible, right? And this is something that Rizwan's spoken about publicly. Iftikhar, you'll remember, even after the Asia Cup final debacle, spoke about how important it is to take the game into the final stretch, right? I just feel, or I would say the larger extent of the Pakistan fan base feels, England are a little bit more clinical in the sense that they don't necessarily want to take the game that deep, right? They want to go in for the kill. And sure, right now they have Butler and Hales to utilize the power play, who are just magnificent at what they do. But even if you take these two out of the equation, and let's say for a second you had somebody like a Johnny Bairstow there, or you had a Jason Roy there, I don't think you'd see much of a change in their approach. They always want to be the kind of team that maximizes the power play. For them, a successful approach is, going 8.5 runs and over in the power play. Anything less than that is a failure. For Pakistan, it's damage limitation of sorts, because you don't want to lose too many wickets there and expose too much of your middle order. So I think it's interesting, the point that Azeem Bhai made earlier about Milan being missing, maybe sort of a blessing in disguise of sorts for England, just because it's more natural to their approach. Phil Salt is somebody who will take from what Butler and Hales give as opposed to somebody who will want to take the game deep. As far as the power play point is concerned, the one Hijab made, I think it's a fantastic point. If you don't necessarily make an impact in the power play, you're constantly chasing the game, right? To a certain extent, I'd like to believe Pakistan, just with the strength that we have with our death bowling, I personally think Haris Rauf is one of the best, if not the best, death bowler at the world right now. And we leave
100%.
the India game aside because I know people quickly retort with that. But to have that kind of an edge with your bowling attack and have an attack that can come back so strongly in the death overs, I think you can make up even if you lose one of the power plays. If you lose both like India did, I think you just want to pack up your bags and head home. But if you lose one of them, I think some teams have a certain core strength that you can come back into the game.
Ben,
I suppose
go ahead.
it's interesting though that like because much as England have sort of at times there have been little frails with the bat in the tournament, their bowling has really come to the fore, and their death bowling in particular. I mean, thinking back to that New Zealand game, edging into the last sort of 5 or 6 overs, New Zealand were maybe marginal favourites there with Glenn Phillips going. They needed what 11s or 12s with with Phillips set and with Neesham to come. You think that's very doable, and England end up winning it a canter. And Curran is obviously a very different sort of death bowler to Haris Rauf, but he's really come into his own, and they've got enough options to sort of fill in elsewhere. So it's interesting because I think that in a way, like England are now a stronger bowling side at the end of the innings than at the start, which I don't think has often been the case, especially when you think when they had Archer and like Mark Wood bowling with the new ball. That was when they would win games. They just kill them off 3 wickets in the power play. That would be done. Whereas now, actually, they limit teams and they can really come back into it at the death. I think is a so I think the power play will be crucial, but it depends what winning or losing it looks like. Like England might well be 55 for 1 and consider that a win. Pakistan might be 40 for 0 and consider that a win. You know, that's where I guess the game plans come in as well. That both teams might end the power play think like, yeah, we kind of did all right there.
Azeem, I'm curious about your take on the power play, but I'm also curious about what you think about, you know, what England are going to try and do to tackle Shaheen, right? Because Shaheen looks like he's getting close to his best. He's still not at his best, which is terrifying. You know, what do you think the mindset will be from England openers or top 3 batsmen when they're facing Shaheen, Naseem in the power play?
I think power plays, unless there's you lose it badly, either way. My feeling is there's a lot of emphasis put on it. I think where games are closed out are in both innings. I think for me, I felt always when I captained or when I played, sort of the last 5-6 overs were huge and you could win or lose. But again, it's the same. You know, if you lose 3 wickets in the power play, I can't remember the exact stats around it, but the chances of you winning the game are very low. I think you lose like 75% of the games you lose if you lose 3 wickets in the power play. Just depends on what losing and winning looks like, really. But it's 6 overs. There's still 14 to go, right? Whatever you're doing, and if you've got to try and find a way of sort of getting back into the game if you have to get back into the game, you know. But wickets, because you've got a situation here where Pakistan want wickets, England want to keep wickets, but still attack. I think Shaheen, there's a lot of criticism around him early on in the tournament. Him at 60-70% is better than most people at 100.
Exactly.
You could see what the plan was and the risk was, and you could see what the thinking was. So when you can see the thinking around the risks, it's you know what, it's fine. When there's no thought process around what's happening, that's when you criticize. But there's a lot of criticism, and the whole point was, hopefully, if Pakistan gets to the back end, Shaheen will be firing, and I think he was getting there against New Zealand. And I think his lengths early on are going to be so important because he bowls fuller than. Again, I don't have the stats of the data, but I'm pretty sure he bowls fuller than most people.
Absolutely, yeah.
One thing I have this with the England batting is the more conventional you are with what you do, the easier it is for them. So you look at the teams that they struggle against Sri Lanka and Afghanistan with the bowling. I think with an England team, if you just do like two seamers ball, three seamers ball, then spin comes on, then back to seamers, that type of sort of stuff. I feel it'll be easier for England. I think Pakistan's got to think outside the box against England. With I think if Pakistan's going to win, Babar's got to be at his A game. Obviously, he's someone who's learning as a captain. I don't think he's a natural, but I think can try as much as possible to throw them off in terms of his bowling plans, because I think if they stay to a norm, this England batting lineup is far too good to not get 180, and I don't see either way. I don't think a Pakistan batting lineup getting 180, setting or chasing. But then again, saying that, Pakistan could turn up tomorrow and get 220. So, but that'd be I think the way England, I would expect England to still go after him. And I would expect him to try and go full and get wickets. So I think it's going to be quite a explosive power play. And within this game, I think it could be quite a crucial part of the game.
I want to throw a listener question as well as something I just read very quickly before we started going on air. I saw the tactics board by Matt Roller in Cricinfo, and both of them revolve around Nawaz. So there was a listener question which said, Nawaz is in bad form. Should we drop him? For me, that's like an absolute no way, but I'm going to throw it to Hijab and Salaar first. And the other thing was very differently. Matt Roller was saying that looking at the matchups, one way Pakistan could, thing Pakistan could do is to maybe go with Nawaz in the power play this time around, as they did earlier. It keeps Hales quiet, could get his wicket too. So I'm curious, what do you, let's go Hijab and then Salaar. What do you think about Nawaz? Drop, no drop, power play bowling, no power play bowling. What's your take?
I don't agree that Nawaz is in a bad form. I know he has had a couple of tough games that he was, he would have wanted to finish those games on a winning note, but he wasn't able to do that. And that's got to hurt sometimes. I did hear, the conversation that Shadab had with Nasir Singh yesterday. And he mentioned how down Nawaz was after the first two games, obviously, because he felt that it was on him to finish those games. And that's going to affect you as a player as well when you're in the ground. But the thing is that the way that he came back, obviously, Babar didn't use him much with the ball. We saw that in the first two games. After the first two games, he didn't use him much with the ball. But then again, with the bat, he showed a lot of intent and a lot of confidence versus South Africa. His innings is underrated, highly underrated, but the kind of shots that he played, and he took on the spinners, and that was brilliant to watch, to be honest. And then again in the semi-final, he took that a very important wicket of Glenn Phillips. We all know what Glenn can do and what kind of form he's in. So that's, his confidence, I think, is building up slowly. And the other thing is, who are you going to replace him with? Who are you planning on replacing Nawaz with? I don't believe that he's replaceable at this point. And if we look at the pattern that Pakistan has had for a while, is they are very reluctant to change their playing 11, very reluctant while they're in a tournament. We saw that last year. We saw that in the Asia Cup, and we're also seeing that here. So no, Nawaz is going to be an important part. Even if he doesn't get to do much with the ball, I think he's very important. He has a very important role with the bat, and he's brilliant in the field as well. So yeah, no drop for Nawaz for me. I think he should be playing.
Salaar?
Yeah, it's I can see where it's coming from. We're hearing a little bit, obviously, with Livingston having the variety to be able to switch from leg spin to off spin as fluidly as he does, and the way Adil Rashid bowled in the semi-final, there was a little bit of a thought process to say if Nawaz has the ability to be able to counter them. I just go maybe even 6 months back, right? Like, I firmly believe if Pakistan were to play a fourth bowler, a fourth seamer, the easiest person to have dropped, if you were thinking some 6 months back, would have been Nawaz, right? Because the left arm spinner in Australia, do you necessarily need one? And they'd invested close to 2 years in their finishers and the likes of Asif Ali in your Khuzdal Shahs at the time. And I just think the growth that Nawaz has shown as a batsman specifically over the last 6 months, whether it's the Asia Cup, whether it's the Bangla Wash tri-series in New Zealand, like Hijab said, I think he's made himself somewhat undroppable, right? Like the team feel confident, the think tank feels that even if he was to play as a specialist batsman, and if there's unfavorable matchups, like for now, Malan likely missing, England will probably only have Stokes, or I guess they could float Sam Curran up if they need an extra left-hander to counter him, but I don't expect England to be doing that, to be honest. I just think they have enough depth as it is. So I just don't think there's any merit to Nawaz being dropped. The value that he provides, even as a floater, if they were to send him up as a low value wicket to counter somebody like a Sam Curran, I think has tremendous value. The bit that I'll tell you, Sami, if I can, that I'm curious on a little bit is the familiarity between the two sides, right? Not too long ago, we'll remember Pakistan and England played a 7-game T20 series. Depending on who you asked at the time, the verdict for that series varied somewhere between an overkill to a masterstroke, right, from the Pakistan Cricket Board. In hindsight, I guess most people would feel it is a masterstroke. The bit that I'm trying to get to here is with familiarity, right? I mean, I think there's merit to say some of these players over the last 8 weeks have interacted with the England players more than they would have with their own families, right? I mean, it's just that kind of connection that they have, and they would have seen a lot of them. I know in that series, Butler didn't play, there was, in terms of personnel, there was a little bit different. Shaheen wasn't available for Pakistan, for example. Ben Stokes wasn't there, Harris wasn't so much in the mix. So there is a little bit of variables in that sense. But I'm just curious, Hijab, Ben, and even yourself, Azeem Bhai, can kind of pitch in on this. In terms of familiarity, right? Like when you've played against a team so much, and even beyond that, if you take the PSL, there's so much of this England 11, whether it's Alex Hales, Phil Salt, for example, are a very core part of the PSL. So they know Shaheen, they know Haris Rauf, they know Shadab, and vice versa. I'm just curious, like in a game of this magnitude, how much of a difference would you guys think that familiarity makes, right? And how much of it should a team focus on maybe doing something a little bit different to throw the other team's sort of think tank off from that predictability of sorts? I'm just curious, like what the general thought on that is.
Yeah, Azeem, maybe we can go to you first. First, you were a spinner yourself, and you've been a captain and played T20 cricket. So I'm curious both about Nawaz, but then also the question that Salaar raised, and then we'll go to Ben.
Well, no, I'm a huge Nawaz fan, so it's just straight no. Even if you provided me a lot of data, I'd say a straight no. But this is the point of wanting to play a style of cricket. Nawaz is arguably. He does all the sort of selfless stuff. He does the pressure stuff, the stuff that doesn't get highlighted a lot. You watch it for Quetta, you watch it for Pakistan, bowling the power play, bowling at the death and stuff like that. So with that is going to come games where he's not going to get it right. For me, he's a sort of person as well as a cricketer that I'd like to build my team around, because what you're going to get someone that's going to just get on, be selfless in their approach and do the tough things really well for you. So I'm a big Nawaz fan. So that's an absolute. I do see where it's coming from. I do see it, and that's a question for the people inside the dressing room. If he's really struggling with his confidence, and you can sense that as a coach, if he's really struggling, then you've got to act, because it's a one-off game. But if he and that's got to be people close to him and in the dressing room that can make that judgment. I don't think anyone else can. But knowing him a little bit and following his cricket, I've always seen him thrive under pressure. Always seen him, he's bowled last overs in the PSL.
Yeah.
One of the most consistent cricketers I've seen across every PSL from the offset. Great in the field and looks like a solid person to have around. So that's an absolute no-no. And the familiarity stuff, I'm not sure really, to be honest. It can go both ways. It can help. It all depends on the individual. Some people, the fact that we'll be thinking about, well, Shaheen, I've played against him 6 times. He's got me out 5 times. That'll be playing on their mind. Where some people will be like a Phil Salt, who's free-spirited, will be like, oh, brilliant, if you get next, but I know what he's going to do, I'll do this, and I'll just go out and do it. So I think it can depend a little bit player to player. I'm not sure it's that bigger, but with the England batting, as I said earlier, for me, if you just do the normal stuff, you're going to really struggle to contain them. And for that reason, I think Pakistan has got to think a little bit outside of the box, and try and as much as possible try and just get out the power play with overs, a lot of options for later, because I think with this England team, you can if there's any way you can actually get to them, I think it's in the middle. And try and really, if you can get 2 or 3 wickets in the middle and just get them a touch cautious, that's when you can potentially, and very potentially, try and get calm them down and not let them get a score that's out of reach or under your score. But I think that middle period, and I think Baba doesn't do this enough, really. I think the use of Iftikhar, if he gets an opportunity, and I mean at any point of the game, get a couple of overs in, I think he's got to do it, because he's going to need as many options as possible. He can't bank on Haris, Shaheen, Naseem all having a good day, because Qudrat Ka Nizam tells you that one is going to go. And against things so he needs as many options as possible. He cannot be doing what he did, where he's got a spinner's over left in the last 3 overs against this England team, because that could literally be game or lost or won. So I think Baba's got to be really on it. If he gets an opportunity where, I would consider Shadab bowling to Hales. And if he gets a wicket in that power play, and Stokes comes in or a Malan comes in, I would consider bringing Iftikhar in. And even think to yourself, and I guess this comes from a little bit of what I tried to do my view was in the power play, win the 6 overs, not that 1 over. And if I had an over that went for 3 and got a wicket, I could get an over out. And if they could just get me 10, 12, that's fine, because it's going to give me an extra option later. And I think in T20 cricket, you've got a captain as what you're going to do in 3 overs time, as opposed to there and then. So I guess it's a balance, because obviously you're going to have all this information thrown at you, matchups and stuff like that. But, one of the best captains I've watched has been Dhoni. And hearing from people being around him, like he'd get all the information, but then he'd go and do whatever he wanted. And that was the instinct of the game. And sort of, I always felt he could see the game, what would happen in 3 overs time before it even happened. And sometimes you're going to get that wrong. But it's having that trust and belief in your own knowledge that more times than not, you'll get it right.
But yeah, go ahead.
Can I say one thing on Nawaz? I'm a bit confused, to be honest, because from what I can see, he's had a good tournament. Okay, the India game, he goes into that last over conceding between 7 and 8, which is fine. In that last over, he bowls 1 bad ball. That's it. Obviously, it's a very bad ball. Full toss, no ball, gets hit for 6. But that's it. Everything else he bowled according to the plan that he wanted. And he restricted India as you would expect. He got, Pandya out. He bowled someone. He got another wicket off a stumping. It just it didn't pan out. But, that was a good over aside from 1 ball. And he went for the same amount of runs as the 2 proper death bowls had gone in the previous 2 overs. That was a good over. Oh wow, it was an okay performance marked by 1 slip up. Since then, he's going at well under 6s, and he's also contributed with the bat, right? Like in the Zimbabwe game, he almost rescued Pakistan, as Hijab Zahid played the good innings against South Africa. The one question is the confidence, because even with his actual returns on paper being good, he just hasn't been trusted with the amount of options he would normally. But that just comes from being that kind of utility player, I guess, that when you can do lots of different roles, if things are actually going okay, you don't need to be that sort of safety valve, I guess. So I think he's had a good tournament, and I'd be very surprised if they left him out. And that was absolutely fascinating on the managing of bowlers, in the power play in particular. And as you say, having options towards the end is a really underrated thing, I think. You saw England do it against India when they sort of snuck through Livingston for that over. That means you just have if someone you think is you want to just bowl someone 3 overs, it just gives you so much more wiggle room, I think. And that, as much as anything, obviously the left armer to the 2 right-handers is a good option anyway in the power play. But for what it could give Pakistan at the back end in the innings, I think it's a really good shout.
Can I ask you?
I just add on that over against India, I mean, and also, I mean, when you're not there, it's hard to, and you're trying to analyze stuff. You saw there was a lot, obviously goes on to Nawaz, but you saw a lot of scramble thinking. You saw a team that had gone under pressure there. You know, you talk about mentally gone under pressure because Rizwan goes and stands deeper. And my belief is bowling spin and when I used to bowl and what I look for and how I got my sort of bearings, Rizwan, because I've watched Nawaz bowl death overs, I've got his bad balls through his cricket that I've watched have always been short. He never errs on the fuller side. Now, Rizwan going back, so when I used to bowl Yorker, I used to look at the keeper's right knee and get my bearings or the top of the stump. I think Rizwan going back has caused him to bowl them full tosses there. I really do.
Interesting.
But I don't see the thinking or the thought process behind him going back because straight away you've taken a dismissal out. You've let Kohli do whatever you want. You know, it just gave Kohli as a batsman all the freedom to stand there and do whatever he wanted. And straight away it showed that all you wanted is to just not get hit for a six. And I think you saw a team there, not an individual. Individuals, but I thought you saw a team there that crumbled under pressure, and their thinking got so scrambled that they've gone with keeper going back, which I think actually caused the full tosses.
That's fascinating. Ben, can I go back to you very quickly? I wanted to ask you because I think Azeem mentioned Rashid earlier. So I'm kind of curious, because I feel like his form maybe has been questioned a little bit, but he was brilliant in the semi-final, and I know Azeem, you're friends with us, you're smiling. I could see you smiling at the thought of Adil having a great game. But I'm curious, Ben, what do you think about the importance of Adil Rashid in this game and the importance of his form for this team, as well as Azeem mentioned the idea of Pakistani team sort of losing its head a little bit in the India game. My worry before this World Cup for England, not that I'm worried for them, but my question mark was Butler seems like a very intelligent captain, but does he have the ability to keep his cool in the way that Owen Morgan did? But he seems to be coming through that test a little bit in this World Cup. Could you talk about those two things very quickly?
Yeah, Adil Rashid is a really interesting one because there were questions over his form. Some of it was slightly overblown, but some of it was sort of fair in that, when we think of Rashid at his best, actually, that's almost a reasonable amount of time ago. Like even during the 2019 World Cup, he contributed, but he's spoken about the fact that his shoulder wasn't at 100% fitness. That meant that he wasn't able to bowl his googly as he wanted, I think. And then since then, there have been kind of stretches where he's been like at his very, very best, especially say last year in T20 cricket, he was phenomenal. He had this incredible series against Sri Lanka where I think he maybe got hit for one boundary in the whole series.
Wow.
It was going at like fours. But it has just been a bit more variable. The thing is, the reason why in some ways it hasn't been talked about as much is there is just no other option. Like England have clearly lost a reasonable amount of faith in Matt Parkinson. And then who are you looking at after that for a wrist spinner? I mean, genuinely, it might not be that long until Rian Ahmed gets a go, even though he's only a teenager, because the cupboard is bare. So he's obviously massively important because he's a brilliant player. And in that semi-final, he bowled as well as I almost think he ever has in an England shirt. It was a complete control. Obviously, that wicket of Sky was absolutely massive. That was basically what you could say it was the moment that decided the game, really, I think. Totally, yeah. So he's massive from being a very good player, but also because going beyond this tournament, if he were to crop an injury or to actually drastically lose form, I don't see where England go, I guess. And on Butler, I actually had some sort of hesitancy when he took over the captaincy because he'd been groomed for so long as the successor to Owen Morgan and obviously had filled in for the odd game here and there. And in those, I don't think I'd quite seen what everyone was raving about, I guess. He obviously makes sense from a lot of points of view as a captain. He's really well respected. He's obviously, his position is not in doubt. He's, up there with the best white ball batters there's ever been. But as you said, I wondered whether in those crunch situations and whether he just had the kind of all that stuff about the tactics, like Azeem has said, in terms of, and all that kind of thing. But I think he's really actually come to the fore in this World Cup. I think in that New Zealand game, that was a Butler masterclass towards the end, really, in terms of how well they're restricted towards the death. And in that India game as well, like just things like, you know, what was it? So the Hardik Pandya came in because Adil Rashid was almost bowled out, and then he sneaks through that over of Livingston bowling leg spin, and just there's been a lot that he's got right in the field this World Cup, and I think this has been, I mean, kind of whatever happens in the finals has been a real tick for his leadership from a tactical point of view. So yeah.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Ben. Oh,
Just on the Rash stuff, obviously a little bit biased, but I think a lot of Rash's stuff is covered. I just don't think he's playing enough cricket. I think it's and I mean, he bowled in that New Zealand game. I thought he bowled as well as he's bowled in the tournament. Actually, I think it was 3 overs, none for 16. It should have been 1 for 14, and could have ended up even better. And then Glenn Phillips got hold of him in the last 2 overs. I just think he's just not playing enough cricket, and I think that's what it goes down to. But you know, to get an England wrist spinners is well, it's never happened, is it? I mean, he's the only wrist spinner that England's ever had that's been successful for a period of time, and there's a reason for that. And I think sometimes Rash's sort of how well he has been and how well he's done is not given enough credit. And I think losing Eoin Morgan as a captain, I think it's taken him time to get used to that, because Eoin Morgan was like unbelievable for him as a person, as a bowler, and for his career. So I think just getting used to that new captain and then going on to the captaincy bit, I think it's unfair to compare anyone to Eoin Morgan, because I just think he was just on another level.
Genius.
Yeah, I think every captain or every leader will have their good bits, and they'll have things that they need to get better at, right? He just seemed like he had the whole package. And I think it'd be unfair to compare Joss to that. I don't think Joss is a natural captain. I think he's an outstanding vice captain. Obviously, lucky enough to have played in the same team as where he's played them roles. And I think it'll take him a little bit. And I think he's starting to now think, you know, this is my team and it's going to play my way, as opposed to I'm continuing the Eoin Morgan team. But he's he's one of the best ever. Everyone respects him, so I think he's got ticks in different boxes, but there's things that he needs to get better at. But yeah, I'm a big one that people should not compare any captain to another, but especially not to Eoin Morgan.
Absolute genius. I've taken so much of your time, so I feel bad because I wasn't able to take all the listener questions. But before we end, just very quickly, one round with assuming that there's no rain, because then everything's up in the air. Assuming it's a 20-over match between the two teams, we'll go with Hijab, Salaar, Ben, and then Azeem to wrap up. Predictions for the final. Hijab, why don't you start us off?
I mean, my heart says definitely Pakistan, but if you look at the reality, it says England. Yeah, so I would go with. I think Pakistan has given us a lot of memories for this World Cup, and winning it would definitely complete that particular roadmap to 92 that we've all been vibing to. So if we go on vibes, Pakistan can do it, absolutely. Like Azeem Bhai said earlier, it's the only team that could challenge England at this kind of a stage is Pakistan. So we'll all just basically have to see which Pakistan shows up tomorrow. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, if I look at the stats and the momentum and everything, it seems like England are the favorites to win.
Salaar, I also love how Hijab has very cleverly tried not to jinx the team. We're a very superstitious bunch, so we have to make ourselves not favorites. So there's a hidden subtext there that she hasn't said. Salaar, go ahead. Yours.
Yeah, I appreciate Hijab saying England are favorites, because I think we thrive as underdogs, right? More than that, I think there's a lot to say with the momentum you carry into a final. I mean, in Pakistan's case, it's probably a multitude of two separate factors. The sort of heartbreaks that Pakistan cricket has experienced over the last 12 months, whether you go back to the World T20 final last year or the Asia Cup final this year, and not so much the defeats, but the manner of defeats and from the positions that we were in. It's just, I think for the entire team, right? Because we've held a very, the core has sort of lived through those heartbreaks.
Yeah.
For them, this is really a moment of reckoning, right? And even sure, we'll have the 1992 deja vu, and we'll play the parallels and the reflections and how everything's just meant to be and Kudrat ka Nizam. But just for them, Shadab, I think, spoke very well about it in that interview with Nasser Sen. It is truly a moment of reckoning, right? It's where everything sort of comes together. As far as England's concerned, I think they had their turncoat moment. If we're not getting too greedy, 2015 World Cup disaster, they sort of completely shifted the way they wanted to play white ball cricket as a whole, right? So they've had their moment. I think it's high time Pakistan gets their moment and then we move with it. So I have no doubts. I think we're 100% looking, as long as it's a full game, 20 over game, I think Pakistan should be able to win. My only concern is a shortened game, because I think England are absolutely violent in a shortened game. And I'm very afraid if it goes down to a 9 or 10 over game, the likes of Hales, Brooke, Butler is just might be a little bit too much for us. But knock on wood, hopefully it's a 20 over game and we bring this one home.
Yeah, I love how you had all the keywords, you know, the Kudrat ka Nizam, the 92 World Cup. You packed them all in, and then violent to describe England, which is very true. Brutal, absolutely brutal. Ben, how about you?
Well, I mean, like England are favourites. I think there's any guessing around that, but it's really close. I mean, you saw in that T20 series they played, there is not much between these two sides, and with Pakistan having sort of solved a few problems and got Shaheen back since then, I know England have strengthened as well. Maybe that gap is almost narrower than it was then, possibly. I think a lot depends on the fitness of Mark Wood. I think in that series, he had a hold over Babar Azam, and in the games when Wood didn't play, when he was rested, he was, you know, peeling off hundreds and making match-defining scores. So that could be a really, really key battle. I think if Wood does play Wood to Babar, particularly in the power play. So I think England are favourites, but I fancy we'll get a really, really good game, because that's what these teams always seem to produce whenever they play. And if that happens, whichever way it goes, I think it'll be the finish this tournament deserves.
Absolutely. And Azeem, just to wrap it off, and also could you just reflect on, I think you said this before, what a likable team this is and how Babar gets too much flack. So with your prediction, and then just reflect on that and we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the toughest question for me, isn't it, as a British Pakistani? And I'm going to try and not be diplomatic. Look, England are favourites, no doubt. And I'll be very honest with some of the stuff that I'm dealing with. It's really difficult for me, this question. And I'm going to say that I actually would love Pakistan to win.
Hell yeah.
I'm a big Imran Khan fan, the 92 and all that. And I think this Pakistani team, as I've said, I think they're probably, from the time that I followed cricket, probably the most likable Pakistani team that I've watched from
100%.
aspects. I know watching some of the former current players on TV through this World Cup. I mean, there'd have been that's the sort of stuff they've always had to deal with within a dressing room, whereas this dressing room seems different. You know, Seklan's clearly got that unity there, and I think a little bit of credit, well, I think a lot of credit for this new generation of Pakistani players needs to go to the franchises. You know, you've got, well, not all of them, but, you know, you've got Rehan, Hassan, Heather, and Nabil especially. I think you've got some pretty, good people and smart people who have been supporting these lads and helping them achieve their dreams. And I think it's just, you know, obviously the state of the challenges within Pakistan and stuff like that, with the floods and stuff recently. I know cricket makes a big difference to everyone's life. And I think it'd be brilliant, all the stick these lads have had, to be able to win the trophy and for Babar to win the World Cup. I know it won't be enough for the YouTubers, but I think it'll be brilliant for King Babar because that's what he is. I just find I don't think anywhere else in the world would you get someone as good as that is slated the way he's slated after 1 or 2 bad games. I don't think Pakistani cricket appreciates how good this one player he is, and clearly how good a bloke he is for him to just, you know, step past all of the rubbish. So England favourites, but I am supporting Pakistan tomorrow.
Dil Dil Pakistan. Thank you so much, guys. I really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone, and for those listening.